OTF directed the attempted murder of TB that resulted in SR's death. The superseding indictment contains only one new material alleged fact that the original indictment does not. So basically the lyrics that he sought to commercialize the death by rapping about the revenge. Told me they got that Addy, go, go, got location, go, go, green light, go, 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 go. Look on the news and see your son, you screaming, no, no, pussy. The underlying falsehood. For the superseding indictment's allegation about the meaning of Banks' lyrics, they describe SR's killing and reference media about it. Banks would have need to have penned them after the August 19th, 2022 shooting. Banks did not, however, write those lines after the shooting. He wrote them 7 months beforehand. I mean, this is a great argument. If they have like solid proof that he recorded on that day, I think they did actually. And I think his bond hearing, they brought like evidence of like even a recording file of that day and everything. Yeah, here it is. Justin Gibson, producer and sound engineer, who recorded the song. Gibson recorded Banks' verse, which Banks wrote and recorded simultaneously during his recording session on January 25th, with all the saved times of the file and everything. And unless the government is prosecuting Banks on a theory of extrasensory prescience, the lyrics could not have soundly informed the grand jury's finding of probable cause. Exhibit 2, Declaration of Ahmad Sheriff, the founder and CEO of Your World Music. Sheriff attests that he received Mr. Banks' verse and lyrics for Wayne and Jackie Boy from Mr. Gibson on July 22nd, 2022, after they received no additional lyrics or modifications to the original lyrics from Mr. Banks. Thereafter, on August 23rd, oh, I'm saying Sheriff, but it's probably Sharif. Fuck. My bad. Incorporate Mr. Banks' verse into the track and finalize the track on his end. So this guy literally got the song over a month prior and never got any more lyrics or recording from Banks. Sheriff reviewed the open source YouTube links that were provided through an email correspondence by the government as examples of videos they referenced in the detention hearing, and can confirm that the audio and video clips featuring audio of the individual Young No, reportedly from news clips, are not from the original recording. He identifies those clips to be fan edits for social media platforms that are altered, fabricated, and inauthentic versions of the original song. They sent fan edits as evidence in a murder for hire case. See, things like this make me like just shake my head. How are you a U.S. attorney and you're doing dumbass shit like this? So some fan incorporated the clip of Quando Rondo screaming at his friend's dead body over the music video. It wasn't through Durk's channel. The original authentic version of the song, Mr. Sharif confirms, does not contain these manipulated elements. He tests that creating altered audio edits is easy to do through social media platforms, and such practice often result in misinformation and misrepresentation of original pieces of music and art. Argument: superseding indictment is not sustainable against Mr. Banks in the face of the fundamental factual error upon which the grand jury relied. That's crazy. If the grand jury actually was shown these clips, specifically these fan edits that weren't made by anyone on Durk's team, or Durk himself, obviously, that's crazy. Such an error requires dismissal of the indictment under the following circumstances. First, where the grand jury returned an indictment based on the government's knowing presentation of a falsehood, citing United States v. Kennedy, a few other sites of cases. The court has the power to dismiss an indictment that the grand jury returned based on information the government knew at the time to be later learned to have been false. Mr. Banks does not take lightly the request that he's making of this court. Dismissal is in all cases a drastic step and thus generally disfavored. That is especially so when a defendant challenges the nature of the evidence and the government presented to induce an indictment. However, court intervention is necessary in cases like this to ensure that a charging decision is a product of the grand jury's own unbiased and untainted judgment. Just citing a bunch of cases here. All of them seem to pertain to the grand jury and how they are presented everything. Courts can and do step in when the grand jury's functions may be compromised. When proceedings are conducted in a manner that violates few clears which ensure the integrity of the grand jury's functions. False information presented to the grand jury here compels the superseding indictment's dismissal. The indictment's insertion about Mr. Banks' lyrics, their timing, and their meaning is false. When Banks wrote the cited lyrics, SR's killing was still 7 months in the future. I mean, that statement right there is crazy if they presented this song as evidence to the grand jury, especially with the fan edits. For Banks to have been writing about SR would thus have been impossible. The only question about this is how such patently false information came to be within the grand jury's purview to begin with. One answer is that the prosecutors who prepared and presented the government's evidence knew that the evidence was false. I don't think they would do false evidence on purpose. Maybe they would. I don't know. We don't know these fucking prosecutors, but I think they're just dumb and thought this was like an official video. Another is that the prosecutor who presented the evidence did not know it to be false, but the witness who conveyed it did. And the third is the answer that the evidence was obtained and presented with a reckless disregard for patent falsity. Dismissal is warranted. False information prejudiced Mr. Banks in the grand jury's indictment. The false information prejudiced Mr. Banks in the grand jury's proceedings. Mr. Banks pauses here to address a threshold issue, materiality. Although a defendant is not usually entitled to relief from an irregularity in the grand jury's proceedings, he is where the irregularity resulted in sufficient prejudice. Prejudice is sufficient to require dismissal if it is established that the violation substantially influenced the grand jury's decision to indict, or if there is grave doubt the decision to indict was free from the substantial influence of such violations. The false information here easily clears that threshold. If they saw these fan edits, it's clearly prejudicial. As described above, the lyrics were one of only 2 pieces of evidence that the superseding indictment cited against Banks, and it was the only piece of evidence that, as the superseding indictment portrays it, at least directly linked Banks to SR's homicide. They have to have more than just that text message about booking flights, lyrics, and the OTF credit card, right? There's got to be more. The court must determine whether the government knew that the assertion regarding Banks' lyrics were false at the time it presented the case, or whether the government subsequently discovered it to be so. If the government knew the evidence to have been false when it was adduced, it had a duty to correct it. Whenever the prosecutor learns of any perjury committed before the grand jury, he is under a duty to immediately inform the court and opposing counsel, and if the perjury may be material, also the grand jury, in order to appropriate action be taken. Were the court to determine, however, that the prosecutor's duty to correct the false assertion regarding Banks' lyrics is not implicated here, it should still dismiss the indictment. The only way for the court to hold that the prosecutor has no duty to correct the factual error before the grand jury would be for it to find that neither the prosecutor nor the witnesses had no cause to know that they were traveling on a patently wrong inference. But that would mean that neither the prosecution nor any witness took the time to determine whether Banks wrote the lyrics and when he wrote them. Rather, the prosecutor appears to have assumed a connection between the lyrics and the homicide and presented the assumption to the grand jurors, having never investigated whether it is plausible. If that is the case, dismissal is proper under the holding and citing that case Semengo. At minimum, the government here likewise overstepped, even if unintentionally, to see why I consider the lyrics inclusion in the superseding indictment. The problem there is not the lyrics themselves, but the inference that the superseding indictment expressly drew from them. Such inferences are more of a matter of argument than they are of percipient testimony or even witness opinion. Further adding color to the government's position regarding these lyrics was the government both changing course and doubling down on their argument regarding the meaning of these lyrics even when confronted at the detention hearing with evidence that proved what is contained in the indictment is factually impossible. Counsel for the government could at that point have made efforts to correct this wrong, as is their duty, but instead chose to posit a new argument about an overlaid audio clip that was also factually incorrect. Again, easily made clear with just a modicum of investigation. Given this window into how quickly the government could change course with the new incorrect factual assertion, Mr. Banks' concern as to what presented to the grand jury is only further heightened. This sort of egregious conduct by the government is what is appropriately considered when determining the dismissal of indictment is appropriate as it is in this case. Should the court not yet be convinced the dismissal is appropriate, it can take the middle ground and compel disclosure of the grand jury proceedings that ultimately result in the return of their superseding indictment. Ooh, yeah. The court should request this to see if they were like, no, wait, watch this fan edit real quick. Or no, they wouldn't even say that. They'd be like, no, watch this official music video by Lil Durk here, where he admits about the crimes, when it's actually a fan edit. That rule permits the court to authorize disclosure of a grand jury matter at the request of a defendant who shows that a ground may exist. He urged the court, therefore, to order the government to disclose the transcripts and the evidence that led to both their original and superseding indictments. That way, the court can compare the prosecutor's presentations in each and discern when and how the factual error arose. Mr. Banks already made this request to the government, but it refused him. What? And defense counsel's other efforts to elucidate the issue have not succeeded. On January 28, 2025, the defense sought clarification by email about exactly what video the government was referencing that featured both TMZ news footage and the Wonderful Wayne lyrics. The government responded that additional discovery would be forthcoming, but provided 2 links to examples of reference video. First was posted by user OTF Edit. The second was a user My Mixtapes. These videos do in fact contain audio and video from news coverage of the shooting in which TB can be heard screaming the Wonderful Wayne lyrics. The government made a discovery production to the defense February 7th that contains these. Bro, we have the edits right here. Bro, legit fan edits. Here they are. Here's one of them. This is crazy. Look, they put the clip of the dead body. Problem with these productions, however, is that Mr. Banks did not create these videos, and the government has failed to show any nexus between these manufactured video clips and Mr. Banks. These videos were not created nor posted at Mr. Banks' direction. The internet users who posted videos, including OTF Edit and My Mixtapes, are apparent fan pages that maintained by people with no affiliation to Mr. Banks or only the family. The court should order protection of the grand jury transcripts to clarify whether, in charging Mr. Banks, the grand jury erroneously attributed these or other fan page edits to Mr. Banks, as the government has clearly done. Prosecutor who knowingly secures an indictment based upon false information or allows a false obtained indictment to persist routes the grand jury from its central protective function. That is clearly what happened here. For the foregoing reasons, the court should dismiss the superseding indictment against Mr. Banks, and the alternative, the court should compel discovery of the relevant underlying grand jury proceedings. So I don't know what the odds of this actually doing something are, but this is, I mean, the government definitely fucked up here, especially if these transcripts of the grand jury show them pointing out these videos with the fucking dead body clip on top of it when it's not made by Banks or anyone. Like, they're